We know that police officers are assigned to protect society, fighting crime and consequently criminals. Well, at least that's what should happen, but unfortunately in some cases, police officers end up forgetting or completely ignoring their duties and thus get involved even with criminals, completely breaking the law and consequently having to pay for their actions. That's exactly what we'll see here today. Authorities in Lauderdale County in the United States obtained a warrant for Assistant Director of Corrections Vicky White, accusing her of allowing or facilitating an escape. White, a veteran employee with 25 years working at the sheriff's office, allegedly helped a suspect named Casey White escape. Despite having the same last name, they are not related. To her subordinates, Vicky said she was taking Casey White for a mental health evaluation at the courthouse and left the jail with the suspect handcuffed in the patrol car. Security cameras showed the patrol car with Vicky driving and the suspect also entering the vehicle. The two ended up disappearing and went missing. Searches intensified, and the car was found abandoned in a parking lot. And according to investigations, everything indicated that the suspect had fled, as well as Vicky. The investigation showed that Vicky had been organizing and, let's say, pulling strings so that the suspect could escape from the place. After a few days on the run from the police, Casey White was identified by a security camera at a car wash, and the police initiated a chase. Unfortunately, during this pursuit, Vicky ended up losing her life, but Casey was captured again and sentenced to life imprisonment because of the escape. A video made from inside a prison in Scotland ended up recording the moment when a prisoner identified as Kevin is simply inside his cell with who would be the prison director. And the most bizarre thing is that he kisses her right there. The two kiss and even enter the cell to avoid being seen while they were getting involved. Shortly after the kiss, she quickly leaves and goes away. Apparently, she had gone to the location just to see and kiss her inmate boyfriend. Everything ended up being recorded by the security cameras of the place. The situation, which had been going on for a few months, ended up being discovered by the local authorities, and the director, besides being suspended from her position, was sentenced to prison. Kevin ended up being transferred to another cell with reinforced security. In Singapore, a police officer was caught by a security camera at the moment when, in an isolated room, she takes an inmate and, locked inside, they begin to kiss and date right there. Some co-workers who were already suspicious of the woman planted a hidden camera in a part of the cell, thus being able to catch her along with the prisoner kissing and having relations. According to information, she even tried to justify herself by saying that she had been forced by the inmate, but as we can see in the images, none of that happened. She ended up being dismissed and the inmate punished. And worst of all, according to information on the internet, the prison officer was married. There are several photos of her with her family on the internet, so she lost her job and probably her family. A nurse who worked inside a prison in the United States was caught red-handed having a relationship with an inmate of the place. According to information from the police officers who investigated the case, it all started with the nurse meeting and starting to bring photos to the inmate. Days then passed, and thus the relationship grew. The nurse became so in love that the inmate took advantage of this to manipulate her, and thus she began to traffic drugs outside the prison for him. The nurse was caught and arrested after they discovered the entire relationship. The suspicion arose when they noticed the woman's proximity to the inmate, who was considered dangerous and aggressive. Moreover, she had already requested several times to meet with him alone in a room of the prison using the excuse that she was going to examine him. From the suspicion then, the investigation began, and everything was revealed. A judge from Argentina was recorded by security cameras giving a kiss to a man sentenced to life imprisonment for taking the life of a police officer. The kiss happened in the visiting room of a penitentiary in the city of Trelew in the southeast of the country. The judge who kissed the prisoner is named Mariel Suarez. She was part of a panel of judges who sentenced the very detainee she kisses in the images, Christian Bustos. Bustos was convicted of taking the life of a police officer in 2009, and in his trial in the year 2021, Mariel was one of the votes against the life imprisonment sentence. The Superior Court of Justice published a note stating that the judge had made a request to meet the defendant in the room where he was, which is indeed strange. After all, it is a highly dangerous defendant, but at no time did they suspect that it would actually be an intimate meeting. The The STJ also stated that it was investigating the case to understand why the kiss and what kind of relationship existed between the two. According to information, the judge was removed and would probably be indicted for the irregularity. A police officer was caught by a co-worker at the moment when she was leaving a prisoner's cell when she shouldn't have been there. They were on duty at the prison until it was time for the policeman's break and meal, who pretended to have left, hid, and with his cell phone managed to record the moment when the policewoman leaves the inmate's cell after spending some time inside. The duty partner became suspicious of the situation after noticing strange behavior from the policewoman and the way she insisted that he leave the place to eat something. According to some information, the video made by the man was handed over to the authorities, and an even larger investigation began to be conducted to learn more about this forbidden relationship that came to an end. The policewoman was dismissed, and the prisoner transferred. A correctional officer from California was sentenced to prison for having sexual relations with an inmate while she was working. The situation gets even more bizarre when it was discovered that she did this in front of other inmates. Tina Gonzalez, who was 27 years old at the time, was arrested after staff from the Fresno County Sheriff's Office received a tip about her relationship with a prisoner. According to the report, Gonzalez was accused of cutting a hole in her uniform to facilitate their intimate encounters and had sexual relations with the inmate in front of 11 other prisoners several times. According to the investigation, Tina showed no remorse for what she did and even confessed to 3 crimes she had committed, among them having sexual relations with the inmate, providing him with drugs secretly, and even giving him a cell phone. She was sentenced to 2 years and 7 months in prison, with 7 months to be served in jail and the other 2 years on probation. 2 police officers, in this case a man and a woman, were caught through a camera that the policeman himself set up at the moment when they had sexual relations in a prison room. In the images, we can see the policeman positioning the camera in a hidden way, and soon after, the woman arrives. They then talk and start exchanging caresses. A relationship then begins, and after a few minutes in the act, the woman gets dressed and leaves. Somehow, the recording made by the man leaked, and thus the 2 ended up being discovered. With the repercussion of the case, the 2 were dismissed from their positions until an investigation of the facts was conducted. A Daytona Beach police driver in Florida, United States, was caught in the act while transporting a female detainee and simply made a very daring proposal to her. In the images, it is possible to see the driver going to where the detainee was inside the vehicle and making an indecent proposal to her, where he asked for a date in exchange for her having facilities inside the prison or even being released for it. Surprisingly, the detainee did not believe the policeman's word and did not accept the proposal. In her deposition later, in addition to defending herself for what she was being accused of, she also revealed and exposed the unpleasant situation with the driver. Secretly, everything was investigated, and through the vehicle's security cameras, everything was proven. He ended up being dismissed from his position and sentenced to prison for abuse. A passionate prison officer got into trouble when discovered by her team members in a very unusual situation. We know that prison officers are there to take care of, monitor, and prevent a riot among the prisoners. However, in this case, the officer who should not have any kind of relationship with any inmate ends up falling in love and letting this passion even take over her senses. The relationship was used in favor of the inmate, who obtained privileged information about searches and events that would happen in the prison, all through her, who was fortunately discovered and obviously dismissed from her position. The 23-year-old officer at the time ended up getting involved with a prisoner 2 years younger who had been convicted of robbery and drug trafficking. In the investigation, it was clear that the inmate approached and manipulated the officer so that she would fall in love, and thus he could take advantage and have benefits with this relationship. A prison officer named Chalene began to raise suspicion among her fellow police officers because of her relationship with some inmates. Chalene seemed very close to some prisoners who were there, something that was not very common, and so a hidden investigation began. In this investigation, it was discovered that the officer seduced the inmates and even slept with some of them inside the cells. Some of the prisoners received hidden cell phones so they could talk to the officer, and in the messages, it is possible to see audio of the officer talking about the meetings and seducing them.
Don't even get me thinking about that because it makes me so horny. Oh, yeah.
After the evidence was obtained, Chalene was called into a room by police investigators who first questioned her about the fact. She then pretended to be innocent.
Of a possible improper relationship between you and Jacob Parker.
I don't know anything about it.
Have you talked to him on any jail phone calls or anything like that?
No.
But when the officers played the messages and showed her all the evidence, she realized she had been caught, only lamenting what had happened, and of course, paying in court. A detention officer from Fulton County in the United States faced more than a dozen charges after being accused of inappropriate behavior with an inmate. 36-year-old Kawana Jenkins at the time faced 2 counts of improper sexual contact with an inmate, 5 counts of violation of oath by a public officer, 2 counts of reckless conduct, 2 counts of cruelty to inmates, and 1 count of obtaining and giving an inmate prohibited items without authorization. Upon noticing the strange and different conduct of the officer, and also through the testimony of one of the inmates, the police opened an investigation and discovered everything. In the end, she ended up being fired and had to answer for her charges in court. The fiancé of a prisoner incarcerated in Texas, United States, was a victim of abuse by a prison officer. Realizing what was happening, the woman panicked, managed to escape, and soon reported everything that was happening. The officer resigned in the hope of avoiding further problems. In images made and kept by the woman for almost 1 year, they show the officer entering her car for a supposed conversation and taking advantage of this to caress her in a very intimate way. Since the woman did not show any reaction at first, the officer thought everything was fine, but little did he know she was secretly filming everything to accumulate enough evidence. When he least expected it, the woman went public and exposed the entire situation of abuse she had been suffering during that time while visiting her fiancé in prison. Immediately, the case generated great repercussion, and the officer resigned from his position, but in any case, he had to answer in court for his actions. A police officer was caught in the act through the recording of a camera attached to the uniform of another officer. In the images, we can see the policeman sitting and locked in the back seat of the patrol car, along with a female suspect who was handcuffed. Another police patrol that passed by the location noticed the patrol car stopped there with no one around. One of the officers then got out and went to check the situation. At that moment, he opened the back door, where the detainees stay, and caught the policeman right next to the handcuffed suspect. It was discovered that he was there proposing a sexual relationship to her, but was caught in the act.
All right, sir, step out of the vehicle for me.
By locking himself with the suspect in the back seat, he completely violated protocols and had no way to justify himself. The officer who found him even questioned him, and he, startled, tried to explain. The images ended up serving as evidence, and he was dismissed from the police force. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.